I'd like to make a motion, Chair.
Yes?
I'd like to make a motion that we suspend the JCB policy and assign our children to high school based on the policy that we were using prior to the adoption of JCB in its current form on November 1st of 2011.
Second.
Second. Discussion,
I'd like to speak to my motion.
please.
I think it's obvious by all the input we've had here tonight, the parents are under a time constraint. I think this has been also the opinion of the hearing officer that we heard from Concord, somebody that's very knowledgeable about this, that's encouraging us to go back to our prior policy if we can't get this straightened out in time. I think in serving the best interests of our students and the public, we need to recognize that this process has failed at this point, and we need to take another look at it. I don't think that there's any reason to wait for that. I think we can, next week at the meeting, we can start discussing the policy again, but in the meanwhile, these folks can go about their way as we have in Hooksett for 8 years and apply to these schools under the previous policy while we sort out what is best.
Any other comments?
Well, I would agree. Oh, sorry.
Please.
Well, I would agree. I think to suspend this and it's what is best for the students and the public. To suspend it for this year, take care of the problems, and review whether we want the most restrictive criteria on that or not at some point.
I'd like to add that I understand the time constraints. Believe me, I understand the time constraints. But I'd also like to clarify, at least my understanding and my interpretation of what the hearing officer said, is that it's given the school district, the Hooksett School District, the opportunity to clarify, revise its stance. You know, we're on record as stating, you know, where we were, where our thought process was when we developed or revised JCB, and I think with very little effort we could revise it to restate that thought process. So, you know, I'd like the opportunity to, you know, discuss it, deliberate it as a board. This is a brand new board. I completely agree, but I think, you know, we all need the opportunity to deliberate. You know, can the I'll say the 3 members from the previous board provide insight to the new members, and obviously the new membership can provide the same. So I think it will allow us the opportunity to deliberate as a brand new board, and you know, we may change ideas and thoughts on the matter by that deliberation. So that's my feeling on wanting to wait until we get together again, and obviously as part of the discussion on this forum, we're going to be discussing policies. I think that's inevitable. We're obviously discussing policies, so that's my reason for wanting to wait until we get together as a board to deliberate the matter.
I would agree with you with everything except the very little effort. I think it's going to do it right. It's not going to take very little effort, and we don't want to rush it right through a revision of the policy. I think we have to take everything into consideration. I think it will take a little bit more than a little effort. So I think the right thing to do at this time is to suspend it, because we want to do it right. We don't want to rush in a new policy that I'm sure we're going to come up with at some point. We're going to come up with a good policy.
I'm also concerned that if we try to revise this policy after parents have already made their request and are in the system, it's going to adversely affect their decisions, and we shouldn't be doing it to try to see where their case failed and hear from the hearing officer, then put in more restrictive policy to try to make our case hold against that person again. To me, that's not fair. We should be talking in general terms about students, not students that are now involved in the system and have already gone to the board and got the opinion of the board that we have failed in our policy. I think that at this point, we need to let them out of the system. Then next week, we can start talking about general students. It's not going to be any of these cases that we've heard details about. It's going to be what would be our current 7th graders, and we would have a good amount of time to discuss that and create a policy for them. And then we could announce that, have a public hearing, have another forum, and get that out there. But I don't feel it's fair to make these people go through this again, which is what's going to happen. We're going to have to create a policy, rehear their information, then we're going to have to fine them, they're going to have to go through appeal if they choose to, and for what? I think it's time that we end this.
If I could, I want to clarify, my thought on revision was to clarify the stance and the thought process of where the board was when it made its decision to revise the policy on 11/1/11. So I agree with most of what you said, Dave, but I also want to say that, personally, I do not think there were any mistakes made, and there have been those comments tonight, but I do not think there were any mistakes made. I think that the board acted diligently. I think they weighed legal advice. They weighed state policies, and so I for the record, I don't think there were any mistakes made. But again, my reasoning is so we can have an opportunity as a board to deliberate.
I would just like to add that my meeting last Thursday with the attorney, he pointed out that in his view, this policy has flaws. And I said that in front of him tonight and asked him to correct me if I misquoted him, and he didn't. So it's clear that there's mistakes. Acting Chair Sullivan, back in, I believe, December, stated on the record, and matter of fact in the Union Leader, that there was no definition for hardship. So we have, and now we're going to ask people to go back and we're going to tell you what we thought when we were making it. Well, I don't think we can do that. It's not fair for these people to go back and say, well, I meant this, but you didn't understand it because it wasn't clearly written in our policy. No, it has to be clearly written in this policy. They have the right to read that policy and react to it. But how are they to react to what our intent was? When it wasn't even clearly demonstrated at the time it was done. Now we're going to go back and we're going to try to clarify that. If I was sitting in this audience, I would say absolutely not. We deserve better than that. We deserve a clear policy, whether we agree with it or whether we don't. And I think it's time to end this policy because it has too many flaws, and let's start over.
And it's getting real late. I'd like to call the question to a vote.
It's my understanding that we need to vote on calling it. And I'll question, do we need to, is that a two-thirds?
I don't believe so. And I think Mike is trying to move this along because you have voted to adjourn too.
We did?
Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
You
Well,
took
I'd
a
like to
vote.
call the question.
You took
Okay.
a vote. You
To
took a
not
vote
extend.
not to extend the time. You did that 20 minutes ago. So we're a little bit out of sync.
Right.
So I don't
that's
think,
why
I
I think we
think
should
you can
vote.
certainly vote on, call the question. You can.
I'm ready to vote.
Okay, all in favor of,
Are we calling to vote, or are we calling on the motion that David Law made for clarification?
this is, we got the motion, and the second to suspend, I want to make sure the wording is proper, suspend policy JCB.
Correct.
And as it was revised on 11/1, and go back to the previous version. All in favor of approving that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay?
Nay.
I'll ask for a roll. Mike, you would?
Yay.
Yes.
Tricia?
Nay.
Cheryl? No.